Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. It is time then to see what's making the headlines with Sonia Sodha, chief leader writer of The Observer, and Christopher Hope, associate editor for politics at the Daily Telegraph. Welcome to both of you. Great to see you. As ever, though, we turn our attention straight away to the front pages. Crunch Time UK is the lead story in the Metro, which reports that most people are already cutting back on spending and dipping into their savings as the cost of living crisis bites. The Telegraph says there's increased pressure within the Cabinet for the Chancellor to do something about it by cutting taxes. The Guardian leads with sexual misconduct allegations against DJ Tim Westwood, which have been made by a number of women. The Sun has the latest on the investigation into the man in custody on suspicion of abducting Madeleine McCann in 2007. The Financial Times reports on what investors fear will be a fall in the value of Elon Musk's Tesla car company if he sells part of it to pay for his purchase of Twitter. And the Mirror has the heartwarming story of a woman who's already given away half of the £115 million she won on the lottery 10 years ago. Well, a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch the programme. So let's bring in Sonia Sodha from The Observer, Christopher Hope from The Telegraph. Welcome to both of you. Crunch time, it's all over the papers, is it not? Christopher, you kick us off then. The Metro is quoting a study by Which, it appears, which shows that most people have now begun cutting back.
That's right, which are finding that 59% of people are now cutting back on essentials. And this, to me, is the beginning of the little over 10-day run-in towards the local elections next Thursday. All of a sudden, politicians have remembered what it's like to be out there dealing with this, with the twin, all these pressures from inflation, from soaring energy bills, all issues caused by the war in Ukraine, and looking at how on earth they're going to help people like you and me and others watching this deal with this crisis. One idea has been looking at areas around childcare costs. That's a kind of important area, but only a marginal area given the scale of the challenge facing the country. And it was the key topic, and rightly so, at today's cabinet meeting. You may argue this is now going to push Partygate to one side just for the next few days.
Well, indeed, you know, why are they having this brainstorming session in Cabinet now? We've known this is coming for a very, very long time. And all sorts of ideas seem to be on the horizon. Let's move to the Financial Times then, Sonia, shall we? Suggesting there's been a row over this idea of cutting food tariffs, and this after grocery bills climbed by 5.9% in a year. I mean, I know we're heading into summer. It's always been that, you know, do you heat your home or do you feed your children kind of line? But nonetheless, food is something that we all need to shop for, isn't it?
Absolutely. So this story is talking about another idea that's emerged from the Cabinet. The Cabinet have been asked to sort of think of innovative ideas to help with the cost of living crisis. And this is cutting food tariffs unilaterally. It's something that the Department for International Trade are opposed to because, of course, if you do that, it makes it much more difficult to negotiate free trade deals with countries around the world. And indeed, Canada there's already been issues with Canada saying, well, if you're going to drop tariffs unilaterally for other countries, why are we going into a trade deal for that with you? Actually, when we look at the high costs of food, some of that is accounted for, and the article says this, the costs of Brexit, extra checks at borders, etc. So it's true that we've made our lives more difficult for ourselves when it comes to the cost of food. But I think when we take a step back from this story in particular, I think it shows how desperate the government is, how much it's grasping at straws. A couple of other ideas on the table are sort of, switching MOTs for your car from annually to every other year, reducing the ratios of, or increasing the ratios rather, way that the number of children that nursery staff can care for, to reduce nursery fees. But these are all quite marginal ideas for what is a really, really serious cost of living crisis. And the thing that the government can't get away from is that some of this crisis is due to factors outside of its control. For example, really increasing energy prices, particularly because of the war in Ukraine. But a decade of government policy has acted to make this cost of living crisis worse. So if you look at tax credits and benefits that support low-paid parents, for example, some parents have lost thousands of pounds a year over the last decade from their household budgets, money to support their wages and to help with the cost of childcare. and the government has made some actions in the last couple of years that have made that worse. So I think, there are real questions to be asked about why the government's sort of tinkering around the edges with MOTs when it's actually directly through its own decisions over the last decade slashed quite a lot from the budgets of low-paid parents with children.
Yes, the Telegraph runs through some more of the ideas, including the MOTs one you mentioned, which is that you get an MOT every other year, not every year. As you say, it's not the greatest cost to households. Reducing the cost of childcare, you've already mentioned as well, Christopher. And certain ministers suggesting that reducing tax is the best way to relieve the burden, with Sunak saying what? That we've run out of money? What's he said, effectively?
Well, he's worrying about debt. I mean, the big issue in the Treasury is they're worrying about the increased cost of borrowing, and every movement in that price, that cost, is going to hugely be a big problem for the UK state to deal with. So he's winning the argument at the moment, and that's why national insurance went up by 2.5% in April. I was struck by that a line in the FT story I was just reading then about showing that Kantar, which is this. They're an index which looks at the price of food. They're saying that food prices have gone up for the average family by £271 a year at the moment. If you add that onto the cost of energy and a further increase in August due to happen in October, I think the government is really now finally addressing, I would argue, one of the key concerns for people out there: how on earth you tackle cost of living prices. These are all little ideas, MOT and the rest, but the key thing may have been not to have gone ahead with that national insurance increase, which the Telegraph and other papers thought was a bad idea, but that ship has sailed.
Yes, and certainly a lot of the food costs are driven because of fuel, aren't they? Energy bills, whether it's the distribution, the making of, the cost of fertiliser, something we had a while ago. All of it not helped by the Ukraine war, and all of it not helped from Wednesday by the news from the Russian energy firm Gazprom that both Poland and Bulgaria will stop receiving their gas from tomorrow. Presumably it's this battle over payment in rubles. But it feels like the first salvo in what was one of Russia's biggest armaments, which is its delivery of oil and gas to Europe, Sonia.
Yes, I think that's right. It's another front in this terrible war, isn't it? And obviously we're seeing the awful tragedy that's taking place in Ukraine, the war crimes that are being committed by Putin's troops under his command. Particularly in the east of Ukraine at the moment. But Putin is also looking to use what other levers that he has with the rest of Europe. And I think, cutting off the power to Bulgaria is very much part of that set of levers to sort of say to Europe that if you continue to support Ukraine, if you continue to arm Ukraine, there will be consequences for you. So I think this is just another example of the extent to which this war and these actions by Putin have really, really remarkably changed, I think, the geopolitics of Europe and indeed the world very dramatically over the last kind of few weeks. And that's a really interesting graph there. Bulgaria gets 77% of its gas from Bulgaria. Obviously, Germany is very high up on that chart as well, as we know, and Germany has come under significant criticism in recent days for not doing more to sort of wean itself off Russian gas to sort of to pull the plug on it, go to cold turkey on Russian gas, as it were. We've seen German politicians, the Bundesbank, say, well, if we were to do this, it could harm, the consequences for Germany would be pretty terrible. But actually, I think, you've got to say, well, look at what's at stake here in Ukraine. So I think it's right that Germany's come under significant criticism for not doing more to sort of pull the plug on its Russian gas.
Yes, Poland suggesting that, gas customers would not have their supplies cut. that its underground gas store is 80% full and they're heading into summer. They've also got alternative supply sources as well, including liquefied natural gas. Bulgaria is saying similar, to be fair. So we'll see how that goes, but it's clearly very significant. And that takes us to the Daily Telegraph, Christopher, which is Liz Truss talking in what's billed as a major foreign policy speech about the long haul we should anticipate for Ukraine. And the Telegraph going on the impact on all of this on defence spending. So this suggestion that NATO's 2% of GDP should be a minimum, really, for what is required these days.
Well, the big issue, I think, in spending terms, looking into this autumn, is going to be defence spending. A lot of Tory MPs I speak to have been tipped off that there's likely to be some movement on the defence budget. When I last looked, of course, Liz Truss was the Foreign Secretary, not actually the Defence Secretary, but she is, of course, one of the 2 or 3 leading contenders to replace Boris Johnson, along with Ben Wallace, who is the Defence Secretary. So I wonder whether Ben Wallace, well, he probably would welcome the support from the Foreign Secretary about increased defence spending. It makes me chuckle inwardly, having covered politics for so long now, I've gone grey, that I can just see how these ministers can work, and how getting involved in the defence spending situation is a good way to show her true blue, not that there are any doubt, her true blue Tory credentials. But this is going to be one of the big debates of this autumn. How much more do we spend on defence in the wake of the war in Ukraine?
Yeah, that's interesting. And the paper also quoting Jeremy Hunt, former Foreign Secretary, obviously, also expected possibly to run again to be Tory leader. Should there be a vacancy? Who knows? Calling for defence spending of close to 4% of GDP. So, as you say, it's part of the battle lines on that not yet a contest. Anyway, lots more still to come, including this story on the front page of The Guardian. DJ Westwood accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. Their headline there. Back in just a minute. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Sonia Sodha, chief leader writer at The Observer, and Christopher Hope, associate editor for politics at the Daily Telegraph. Welcome back to both of you. Sonia, let's go to The Guardian, shall we? Its lead story is about DJ Westwood, accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. They're exclusive in this joint investigation by The Guardian and the BBC. The story under that, though, is about the health agency set up to tackle coronavirus is in turmoil, they say. Staff cuts of up to 40% looming, and plans to suspend routine COVID testing in hospitals and care homes to save money.
Yes, that's right. So these are really big cuts coming up quite soon on the cards. As you said, staff cuts of up to 40%. And I do think there are some quite serious questions here. Now, obviously, we've moved out of, really critical phase of the pandemic, and everyone hopes that there isn't a new variant sort of lurking around the corner that's going to jeopardise the sort of wall of immunity that we've already built in this country through vaccinations and people getting infected already. It's understandable that we're in a new phase, but I think there are really serious questions. Because first of all, I don't think we're at the stage where we can really significantly cut back on testing yet. And secondly, one of the things that really caught us with COVID was that we were not properly prepared for a global pandemic. And lots of stuff has come out about how there were these planning exercises 5 years ago in the Department of Health that showed Britain's lack of preparedness, and that this was not acted on. So I would hope actually that from the lessons that we'd learned from COVID, we would be repurposing this agency as the risks of COVID sort of lessen over time, towards thinking about how we need to be prepared for the next big pandemic. So I think it is a bit of a worrying story from that perspective.
A couple of transport stories, in fact, on the front of the Financial Times. One is about a creaking bus network, certainly in rural areas, and the importance of that for levelling up. And the other one is Tesla. So we've got a minute 15 to do both of them. Christopher, take it away.
Well, I'll go into fourth gear for you, Anna. Briefly, on buses, I think it's fascinating and good for the FT to put bus services on page one. They're a big champion of levelling up. I think this is a key part of it, the issue of transport services around rural parts of the country. They're saying here that there's an uphill struggle to reverse 40 years of neglect in bus services. I'm looking around elsewhere. The BBC reporting recently that 31 areas were given £1 billion for new bus services, but campaigners said that was woefully short of what's needed. I think the government gets this, but it's very slow to bring back more services, investing more money. They're trying to bring back train services, reverting the beaching that were cuts back in the 60s. But I do think that bus services are absolutely key for dealing with levelling up. They are a nightmare if you rely on buses in rural parts of this country, and they must be improved, and good for the FD for covering it.
Yes, and I'll do Tesla very quickly. Apologies, Sonia. Tesla dented as investors count on Elon Musk, a share sale of his Tesla shares to pay for Twitter. Tesla's market value falling by more than 100 billion today as investors prepared for that sell-off. I'll let you do that next time. Sonia Sodha and Christopher Hope, lovely to see you both. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.